And I am live. Welcome. Thank you for Danny for showing up. It's Gordon Cosby coming live and unscripted. I'm going to be talking about South Africa, Donald J. Trump, uh, an individual by the name of Julius Malema. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name well. South African President Ramphosa. I believe I have that name pronounced reasonably well. Candy is wet because it's still raining in my little corner of Ontario. I think it's raining throughout. Get down. Have a sip of my coffee. This dog can drive you crazy because of what I have in my hand. So let's deal with her. Shake, lay down, speak. Come on up. All right, there you go. All right, it's a good thing I'm going shopping tomorrow because we are running out of treats. Thank you for showing up, Danny, on this Friday, the 23rd of May, 2025, just after 10:45. I got off. I started pretty much on time, scheduled this for 9:45, and I'm within a minute or so of that time, which is about as good as it gets for me. I don't know that I'll ever be able to start right on time. Things always happen. But let's get into it. In the description down below, I have included a link to a video. And this is the video, reportedly, this is the same video that was shared by President Donald J. Trump in the White House during that meeting that he had with the South African President Ramphosa. And I initially was, I'm going to say, disinclined to watch the video. And I don't think I'm alone in that regard. I do not suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. But the flip side of the coin is that I'm not a MAGA Trump type either. I'm between the two extremes. I will say that I tilt more toward the MAGA side than I do toward the Trump derangement syndrome side. I will criticize Trump. I will criticize aspect. I don't like the man's personality at all. His personality turns me off. He's a braggart. He has little to no humility. The only humility he has is fake humility. I get no credit. I get no credit. I never do, but that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. He has an annoying personality, but that doesn't mean that he's always wrong. And there's a tendency, I think, especially in Canada, where Trump probably basically flipped the Canadian election. His injection into our political landscape probably is the reason why Mark Carney is Prime Minister of Canada. Mark Carney was able to, because he was able to leverage hatred of Trump into a damn near majority mandate. Um, Danny's writing that all leaders need to be criticized from time to time to keep them in check. Now, in a free and democratic society, that is essential, the ability to criticize government leaders, to hold their feet to the fire, as it were. And there's an aspect of Trump's personality which is concerning to me, in that he has such a thin skin in terms of his ability to handle criticism. But at the same time, there are times when I love him. That during that White House meeting, he showed that video, and the very first question to be put toward him by a member of the press came from a guy named Peter, apparently, from NBC. And the reporter from NBC immediately pivoted away from the inflammatory video that had just been shown with a South African political leader. Is Julius Malema in that video? Is he advocating for, and I'm going to say the word, I did a video yesterday where I tried to avoid using the word. I used the word pesticide, but I hate that. So I'm just going to say the word. And if it triggers the algorithms to suppress my video, oh well. The word is genocide. And is this Julius Malema? Is he advocating for genocide? I have a hard time. I don't have an issue with anyone who says that this Julius Malema is advocating for genocide. Certainly sounds to me like if he's not advocating for genocide, he's certainly advocating for death and the killing of white South Afrikaners, and probably what. And I'm learning a bit. Uh, like a lot of people, I don't know. I did not know a lot of the history of South Africa. I knew that it was a former Dutch colony. I didn't know exactly when it had been settled. Turns out it was settled in the 1600s, 1630, 40, 50, somewhere in there, 1600s. Um, that it was set up as something of a halfway point, if you want. It was going to be the Dutch East India Trading Company that was going to India and the Orient. They needed a station to stop at, to reload, to rest up, to stock up on food and water. And so this on the Cape, of, I guess they called it the Cape of Good Hope, on the southern part of Africa. It's a good place to have kind of a rest stop for these, probably months long ocean journeys to collect spices and silks from the Orient. And that eventually settlements were created. Dutch farmers were given land. They farmed the land, and then the population grew and grew and grew. Learning that the peoples of South Africa are disparaging, incredibly disparaging. It's not just uh, it's not just white Afrikaners who are the descendants of these Dutch, but it's also French and German and other Europeans came in and basically joined in with the Afrikaner community, adopted their language. And then, in terms of the Black African population, the initial population in South Africa were Bushmen, kind of nomadic hunter gatherers. But then that other peoples, like the Zulus, for example, and the Bantu people, came down from the north, and they occupied the land as well. And so it gets incredibly complex, incredibly, and even within the white South African community, there are about 5 million out of over six. They're in and around 60 million people in South Africa. Only about 5 million of whom are white of European descent. The other 55 million or so are predominantly Black. However, there are also communities of Asians, of Indians. Indians and Chinese are both Asian, so I should say Chinese and Indian communities. And there are communities within communities. And there's a tendency I find among North American, Western observers that we want to reduce everything into the simplest form. And so, okay, you got Black South Africans and white South Africans, but within the Black South African community, there are disparaging groups within that population, and likewise within the 5 million or so white South Africans. About 2.7 million of white South Africans identify as Afrikaner. An Afrikaner is these individuals who are Dutch, they're Dutch speaking. Afrikaner is a Dutch dialect. I imagine that someone who speaks Afrikaner, that they would understand someone speaking from the Netherlands, and probably someone from the Netherlands would understand someone speaking Afrikaner, but there might be a little disconnect, similar to the way the French in France have difficulty with Quebecois, and Quebecois sometimes have difficulty understanding people from France. Um, Getting back to Trump, Danny has written in a comment, it wasn't a liberal versus conservative election. It was a do you hate Trump election, big time. John is here, John 5. Good to have you back, my friend. So the question I'm asking is what is happening in South Africa? Does it constitute a genocide? And man, I initially didn't want to watch that video. I won't say I didn't want to watch it. It's just I was disinclined. That's the way I'm framing it. I was not motivated to go and watch the actual video. When they showed you the footage of Donald Trump meeting with President Ramaphosa in the White House, they didn't cut to the video. They showed images from it. They showed little snippets of it, but you didn't get to see the whole thing. And so eventually I figured, okay, well, if I want to be informed about this, I've got to watch that damn video. And I did read some articles, BBC, CBC, and CNN type articles, mainstream, and they were framing it as this. They were framing this Julius Malema as a member of a fringe political movement in South Africa, fringe, and that he's not representative of the broader Black South African community, and that any claims of genocide are overblown and this is being politicized, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And right there, having the media and government spokespeople from South Africa, the government leaders, Ramphosa and others, trying to pour cold water on things, immediately that gets my radar up, because having come through the COVID era, most of us know. If you wanted to know where the misinformation and disinformation was coming from, it was coming from government officials and it was coming from the mainstream media. They were promulgating all kinds of lies, telling everyone that anyone who promotes this idea that the SARS-CoV-2 virus came from a lab, that they're spreading misinformation and disinformation. Well, we find out later that they were not spreading misinformation, disinformation. This wet market bat human origin story, that was the misinformation, disinformation. That was a theory that was not supported by evidence or science. And so now hearing mainstream media outlets and government officials saying, oh, this thing about genocide, forget about it. It's misinformation, disinformation, it's propaganda. Oh, really? Okay, well, now I'm more inclined to believe it. And that led me, I've got to watch this video and to do some digging and find out, who is this Julius Malema? Is he really just a fringe figure? What's he got, a few thousand followers, few hundred, just a fringe guy? Well, as it turns out, he's a sitting member of the South African Parliament. As evidenced in there, he's speaking as a government member, the same way that Elizabeth May, Jagmeet Singh, any number of other people would stand up in our House of Commons who are not a member of the governing party. Let's just read what's being written. John thinks this is a great topic. I think so too. It's certainly current. It's on everyone's mind. You think about how long will this last? How long will we be talking about this? Remember when everyone was talking about all the plane crashes? Plane crash in the Potomac River, in Philadelphia, in Alaska, plane overturning in Toronto. There were all these plane crashes in a short time, and that was the focus. Now we've pretty much forgotten about it. Okay, plane crashes are yesterday's news. How long will this stay current? Who knows? Sharunyan's here as well. Good to have you here. And Sharunyan, he's writing something about, I can't even read it, at he's at a temple, and I can't pronounce the name of the temple, but all good. So I'm going to share my screen, see how well it works. Doesn't always work great. Let's see. Let me make sure that South African leader heard calling for killing during revolution in the. Let's see what.
Of DA in PE is a white man. So these people, when you want to hit them hard, go after a white man. They feel a terrible pain because you have touched a white man. Not because my Shaba and Soli will not be touched. They will be touched. Don't want. But we are starting with this whiteness. We are cutting the throat of whiteness.
Shoot to kill. Yamaza. Kill the poor.
the farmer. Namasa, kill the poor, the farmer.
There we go. I'm back. I hope that I'm not lagging too much. John's writing a red beret. I suppose this means something. No, I don't believe that they've stricken the video. I think it's still down there below, but I will invite you to watch it on your own and to juxtapose it against what the mainstream is saying about Julius Malema and his EFF, which stands for the Economic Freedom Fighters Party, which is pretty much universally described as a communist party. And once you get communism thrown into it, this Marxist ideology of breaking people into two groups, the oppressed and the oppressors, and this very simplistic binary dynamic of good people, bad people, oppressed and oppressors. The oppressed are always good, the oppressors are always bad. And once you get this very brain dead, simplistic dynamic that is aimed at 6-year-old level, things can get very dangerous. And at any rate, this guy, Malema, his party garnered over 1.5 million votes in South Africa's most recent 2024 election. And that's over 10% of the vote. So if this Malema and his Economic Freedom Fighter Party, if they are to be called fringe, well, then the NDP in Canada is even more fringe. The NDP is even more fringe than Malema and his EFF, Economic Freedom Fighter Party. And what he is doing is he is advocating to occupy land, to occupy the land. He talks about killing. He talks about can you imagine? And I'll throw this out there. Can you imagine if Trump on January 6th of 2021, when they were going through the certification of the 2020 election in the United States, if Donald Trump had engaged in that kind of rhetoric when he gave his speech in advance of the protesters who believed in the United States during that 2020 election, Trump promoted this idea, and he had a lot of people who agreed with him that the election was quote unquote stolen, that these mail-in ballots, that there was fraud and irregularities, and that the election had been stolen. That was Trump and his supporters' belief. And so they rallied on January 6th in Washington, D.C., and Trump then called upon his supporters to march peacefully down, I guess, Pennsylvania Avenue toward the Capitol building and to protest in a peaceful fashion. However, some of his supporters were bent on an insurrection. I have no doubt that there were individuals listening to Donald Trump give his speech who heard his calls for a peaceful march, that they heard, let's go and take over the government somehow. They warped, twisted, changed his words, and they went, and there was violence at the Capitol. It's such an incredibly crazy situation that happened there, because you had security officials opening the doors, and that QAnon shaman guy with his water buffalo hat and his face painting being led around. But at the same time, there were shots fired. There was at least one person killed. And then in the wake of that, they tried to frame that as Trump was leading an insurrectionist movement, even though his words had called for peace, a peaceful march down to the Capitol building. They said, yeah, but he should have known that he was inciting violence, et cetera, et cetera. And now here we have a man, this Malema, who's talking about pow, 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 kill, kill, kill. And it's like, how is that going to land with young, disenfranchised Black youth and men? Are they going to be tolerant toward the Afrikaner population, the farmers, the white farming population within South Africa? Or are they going to listen to the words of this Malema, and are they going to be emboldened to go out and kill. And I've done almost a complete 180 on this issue, because when it first started getting reported on, when Trump had first granted Afrikaner farmers, South Africans, this Afrikaner community, when he had first granted them preferential treatment, I was inclined to say, well, wait a minute, there are lots of populations all over the world, and especially in places like Kenya, Uganda, a lot of African nations that are very unstable, with populations that are under threat of death as well. And why not give them preferential state treatment as well? If the criteria is a population of people that are at extreme threat of being killed, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you're going to allow one population of people in, why aren't you letting another population of people in? But now here we have South Africa. Strikes me it is different, because this Malema is the head of a political party that garnered 1.5 million votes, and only about 60% of South Africans voted in that 2024 election. So how big is his support base? Not everyone votes in elections. In Canada, 65, 70% vote. There's about a third of the population who doesn't vote. In South Africa, it's over a third of the population didn't vote. How many people are supporting this EFF party and this Julius Malema and his call for violence against white South Africans? How big? I would have to imagine that his movement, for lack of a better word, that he probably has not just 1.5 million, but millions. When you watch that video, you'll see that he appears to have a very large crowd, a Trump-sized crowd, listening to him go, "Pow, pow, 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 violence, kill." And uh, on this issue, when it comes to Trump granting, fast track refugee status for white Afrikaner farmers into the United States, to me, it's a no brainer. Let me read what's being written. And John 5, with respect to the Red Beret, it speaks to a militaristic movement. When I see political leaders donning militaristic gear, it strikes me that it's a call to a militaristic style movement when you have a uniform. And the fact that this is a communist party, the Communist Party loves Marxism at its core, loves to divide people into groups, loves to put people into little camps. It gets us fighting against each other, and a house divided against itself cannot stand. And let's, that red beret and this idea of a uniform is certainly, in my mind, by design. And let's see what Danny's writing. There was FB in the crowd causing a lot of problems and starting the problems. I think you're talking about the January 6th FBI. Couldn't read it at first because you spaced out FBI. Yeah, no, quite often when there are individuals within a protest movement, the ones advocating for violence, the ones pushing for it, often this goes back to the Vietnam peace protests. The US government sent agents in to, they wanted to discredit the peace movement. And so they had operatives within the peace movement advocating for violence because they wanted the nightly news to discredit the peace movement. And Danny's saying that was no way an insurrection. They didn't come fully armed. Guards actually opened the doors to the place for them. Yeah, but I'm making a comparison here between what happened on January 6th, 2021, and what this guy is advocating in South Africa. South Africa is supposed to be a Western nation that follows the rule of law. Here you have a man who is spreading hate speech. Certainly, it meets every measure. And yet he's sitting in parliament, he's giving speeches, he's filling arenas, and he doesn't get arrested. He has been charged with hate speech and paid a fine. And that was it. Just pay a fine and you're good to go. And then another hate speech charges were brought against him, and he was acquitted. So I just wonder, and it's impossible to know, how would I feel if I was an Afrikaner living in South Africa? I was a white farmer living in South Africa, and hearing that type of rhetoric said by not a fringe but a prominent political leader whose party has seats in their parliament, whatever their parliament is called. We call it the House of Commons. In Ottawa, it's called the Queen's Park. In Toronto, in Quebec, they call it the National Assembly. I don't know what they call the Knesset in Israel. I don't know what they call their parliament in South Africa, but whatever it's called. I mean, here's a guy who has sitting members of this party advocating for what appear, and he is on record as saying that he is not currently calling for genocide. He's not currently calling for widespread killing of white farmers, but that he won't promise not to call for it at some point in the future. It sounds to me like he's calling for at least sporadic violence now, and perhaps a revolution. He uses the term revolution in his rhetoric. And you talk about a recipe for disaster. There is another video circulating right now with Dr. Jordan Peterson, who's talking to a South African historian that I would equally invite you to watch. After having read up a fair bit and having learned about the Zulus and the Bantu people and the Bushmen, original inhabitants of this region, and the conflicts and how South Africa came into being, what the population is, 2.7 million Afrikaners, another 2+ million of other white populations, trying to get a grip on this situation that the media tries to present in a very binary, right, left, black, white, yes, no, super simplistic. You've got an incredibly complex, dynamic situation with so many different moving parts. And in the West, we like to think we're informed. We like to fool ourselves that we've been informed and that we know. And so we say, okay, well, there are two groups. There's the Black South Africans and white South Africans. Well, it's a little more complex than that. Within the Black community, you have the Bantu, you have the Zulu, you have these different disparaging communities, and well, that's too hard. I can't deal with all that. There's blacks and whites. That's it. Well, wait a minute. The whites, you have 2.7 million are Afrikaners, but then there are also other European groups, and that's true. They're all just white. There, it's easy. Don't complicate things for me. And are they advocating genocide? No, 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 it's not genocide. I listened to CNN. They said that's a fringe. They're fringe, so I don't have to concern myself. And this is the unfortunate place we find ourselves in today's world, where the world is very complex and it's too complex for most. And so, but people still want to fool themselves into thinking they understand things and that they're informed. And so they, just reductionist, black, white, genocide, not genocide. It's crazy. Let's see. Danny's writing that the January 6th, was not an insurrection. And then he says there will be bloodshed because of this guy, this Malema. There already has been bloodshed. We saw, and that's one thing that is very telling. You will notice that the media and the South African government officials did nothing to repudiate anything that Trump put forward. They didn't say this video was fake. They did not claim that the video was fake. They did not say that Malema is, that he's a fictional character. When Trump handed over that waft of newspaper articles that spoke to the number of white South African farmers who have been killed, they didn't discount that this is happening. They just at this point, I think what they try and do is they try and leverage on the fact that just about half the American population and more than half of the population in countries like Canada don't like Donald Trump, and that anything he advocates must be bad. I have never seen a single government anywhere in the world that has like, look at Turkey and the Armenians. Has Turkey admitted the genocide that it committed against the Armenian population? No. No government ever admits it. Did Adolf Hitler's, government in 1930s, 40s Germany admit that they were engaging in genocidal actions? No. Did the Soviets, when they murdered probably, 50, 60 million of their own citizens, starved them, seized all their land, confiscated their land, occupied the land of the Kulak farmers, and led to starvation throughout the old Soviet Union? Did they admit what they were doing? Did Mao Zedong admit, when he was killing up to 100 million people of his own Chinese citizens? Did they admit it? No. And is the South African government of today going to admit that there's a genocide taking place among the white Afrikaner community under their watch? Are they going to admit that, well, yeah, okay, it's happening and there's nothing we can really do about it? Are they going to admit that? Of course not. They didn't try to say that the video that Donald Trump put out, that it was false. They didn't say that these newspaper articles that he was handing to Ramphosa, they didn't say that these are fake, as Trump did with that idiotic reporter from NBC. And for what it's worth, the guy from NBC is not an idiot. His name was Peter. And immediately after showing that video, this reporter from NBC immediately tried to pivot the conversation away from genocide in South Africa, or at least the potential genocide in South Africa. And he wanted to switch the topic completely to the jet that the Qataris have gifted to the United States Air Force as a replacement for Air Force One. And he wanted to pivot away. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about what's happening to white South African farmers, because the world is undergoing a seismic shift right now that's dangerous. And this has definitely Danny is writing Jesus is King. And you talk about this world needing Christ. And I'm talking about the white South Africans, and I'm talking about the black South Africans. And all the disparaging communities that exist within those two broader camps. We all need Christ more than ever in today's world, because Christ is the one who preaches a gospel that says, you've heard it said, take an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth and a life for a life. I say unto you, take not an eye for an eye, nor a tooth for a tooth. But when anyone hits you on the right cheek, offer them up the left also. Give to everyone who takes from you. If someone takes your sandals, give them your cloak also. You talk about a counter-cultural, uh, um, a counter-human nature. This puts us in touch with our godly nature. And it is needed so desperately. The situation in South Africa is horrific. The history is so incredibly complicated. And there is a tendency to want to say that the whites are all good and the blacks are all bad, or the blacks are all good and the whites are all bad. And the simple fact of the matter is, when you approach this from a Christian perspective, you recognize that both communities, both groups, any individuals within those communities, all are broken, fallen, sinful, horrible creatures on both sides. And but that's not the way the world operates. The way the world operates is for the black South Africans to hold themselves up as paragons of virtue, and we've been wronged and we're the oppressed. So anything we do is justified against these horrible whites who are horrible, and everything they've ever done has been bad. Very, very simplistic way of looking at things. And likewise in reverse. The white South Africans will say that we are, some of them anyway, will say we are the paragons of virtue. We are the wonderful people. We are the godly people. We are more sinned against than sinning. And so we are justified in doing whatever we've done and whatever we continue to do against the black population. You talk about an incredibly difficult situation, and it's not as black and white as it's people like to fool themselves into thinking they're informed. I don't know. What I probably know is a thimbleful. versus, you have an ocean of information on the history of South Africa, and what I know will fill a thimble. But a lot of people don't even have that thimble. Uh, I'm going to read some of the comments. John 5 is writing that Trump and Elon probably want what CBC probably what CBC wants us to think. We are programmed, I say it all the time on this channel, that the CBCs, CTVs, globals of the Canadian media landscape and the ABC, NBC, CBS, CNNs, and even Fox of the American media landscape, they are there to program you, and they're there to tell you what to think, what to believe, and even, and most importantly, because emotion is so important, they're going to tell you how to feel about things. They're going to tell you when to feel anger, sadness, compassion. They want to drive emotional responses because emotion, at the end of the day, humanity, we're emotional beings. We are not intellectual beings. We operate largely on emotion. Emotion will get us to do irrational things. Well, I was angry. Well, I was upset. I'm justified. Um, and Danny's talking about what, in reference to what I was saying with the government sending in their, he calls them agent provocateurs that are there to stir things up. Danny is writing, when the folks on the news tell you this is what we know, what they really mean to say is that this is what we are allowed to tell you. This is the way we are being instructed to frame the debate. You don't want to get the COVID vaccine. Why? Well, because it was rushed through development and there isn't any long-term safety data. Pharmaceutical products normally take 10 years or so, and you can't just do it in a few short months. That's the reason I didn't get the vaccine. No, the reason I didn't get the vaccine is because I, like everyone else who refused it, was racist, misogynist, science denying, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what the media put forward. They didn't talk to me. They didn't talk to anyone like me. They wanted to frame this narrative. Well, the unvaccinated, these are individuals who deny science, and they're often racist and, misogynist and all, and transphobic and Islamophobic and all the bad words. That's what these are the people who don't get the vaccine. And that's the way the media works. And these people who are suggesting that there could be very well be a genocide taking place in South Africa, these are uneducated, Trump supporters, MAGA types, and you really don't need to concern yourselves with them because these people are not very bright, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I would invite you to go online and look at that video that I've shared down below, this video that Trump showed in the White House. At least I think it's the same video that he shared in the White House with this Julius Malema. And look at the comments down below. South Africa has a population larger than that of Canada. And there are comments in there that purport to be from white South Africans and from black South Africans. So let me read on what else is being written. And I just realized I had it on top chat, not live chat. So it's taking a second to flip over. Good. Anna Monarchy writes, good evening. Anna Monarchy showed up a bit late, no worries at all. And Shereen is stating the obvious that I am a man, in case anyone is confused. I think the voice gives it away, does it not? And the bald head, and yeah, a little bit of a beard. I shaved down my goatee. And Anna Monarchy is asking if anyone else is getting static through the audio. I hope not. And saying that my speaker should be fine, but I'm going to check the audio on a song. No problem. And I have Afri Sentry saying that yes, there is some static and confirmed. Oh, let me try something and tell me if it's better. Here. All right, is that better? Is that has that improved the sound quality at all? If you can let me know. I like what Danny writes, tell a vision. The media is there to tell you what to think, what to believe, and how to feel about that. I see I have the name Afri Sentry here, who was commenting on this the static. And given your username, Afri Sentry, uh, gives you the idea. Afri being denoting Africa, I would think, and sentry is a guard, someone standing watch. So it seems to me you might be an individual who is from South Africa, or at least from Africa, and you certainly would have insight that I do not have. Canadian. I have worked with people from South Africa. South Africa. I always have trouble with that accent. Sounds kind of British, kind of Kiwi, kind of Aussie, but not quite. Very clipped way of talking. This Dutch amalgamation of British and Dutch. Kind of, it's hard to nail down. This Afrikaner, Dutch, yeah, this South African way of talking. And I've attended a Dutch church for a number of years. Christian Reformed Church was born out of the old Dutch Reformed Church. And I live in a community that has a lot of Dutch people. Now, that doesn't mean that these are the Dutch who came from the Netherlands or from Holland. They're not necessarily related to the Dutch who live down in South Africa, but quite often there's connective tissue there. The Dutch have an amazing history that I think is largely forgotten. New York City used to be called New Amsterdam before it was taken over by the British. The Dutch East India Trading Company said they had outposts in Indonesia, in India, in South Africa, in the West Indies, in the Caribbean. The Dutch are famous for their farming, and they don't just farm tulips. There's a lot more than just those beautiful tulips that grow in Holland. Um, okay, Afri-Century is here and writing that most are Dutch, but some are English, German, Italian, French, Russian, and Portuguese. Yes, from what I understand, the majority are Dutch, and then that other disparaging European populations came in to South Africa, and that they typically, basically, what I have read, basically were absorbed into the Afrikaner community, and that so many generations have passed now that individuals, even though they have French or German ancestry, they identify now as Afrikaner. It's become its own unique identity, divorced from the Netherlands, divorced from the Dutch. Where there's the Dutch people, there are the Afrikaner people, and yes, the Afrikaners did spawn, for lack of a better word, from the Dutch. They spawned from them, but after having spawned from them, they've gone and they've developed in their own direction, similar in a fashion, I would imagine, to the way that Quebecers, French Canadians, the Quebecois, are rooted and have the same roots as the French, but they've gone a different way. Uh, let's see what Danny's writing. That And he's saying that he has an uncle that used to be involved in the production of vaccines, and that this uncle said it's an average of 7 to 10 years before approval. Uh, and yeah, my understanding, getting back to the COVID thing, is that prior to COVID, a vaccine was determined to be an agent or a substance that conferred immunity, typically made either from a causative agent of the virus or an attenuated version of it or something like this. And the idea was that, and typically administered through injection, and it was to confer immunity. Once you got it, once you were immunized, once you were vaccinated, immunized, they were interchangeable, those two words, you were immune. And that's been my experience with measles, mumps, rubella, and polio. I got those shots. Never once did I get measles, mumps, rubella, or polio. So cause and effect, I don't know. But I know that after the polio shot, I never got polio. So I can infer possibly that the reason I never got polio is because I had the polio vaccine. Now, I never got the COVID vaccine. I did get COVID February 2022, and I've heard it said by Anthony Fauci, no less, that the best form of vaccination is prior infection. So, in a fashion, I'm vaccinated. I got COVID, and so that has rendered me immune. And has it? Well, February 2022, 3 years later, three plus, I never got COVID. So let's see what is going on here because I got a few things being written and I have some new people. Rainier Graham is here, is saying, um, and I'm having trouble with your with what you're writing. ONS is Swede like Boer. Now you got the Boer population, and then we get the Boer Wars, the first Boer War, the second Boer War. And then, I mean, you talk about an incredibly complex history that's involved here. And, you have all these competing groups, the Bantu people, the Zulu people, the Boers, the Afrikaners. Yeah, and it's not as cut and dried as, as we would like. I would invite you to watch Jordan Peterson within the last couple of days has dropped a video talking to a South African historian and they get into a lot more of the history. And I find that this historian, the South African historian, who is a white gentleman, uh, that yeah, obviously there's a bias. Anytime if you talk to Benjamin Netanyahu about the history of Israel, you're going to get a biased view. And if you talk to Nasrallah of the Hamas or Hezbollah, and they're asked to present their history of the region, they're going to have a diametrically opposed view. But I find this gentleman, this academic that Jordan Peterson talks to, that he at least attempts to see things from differing points of view. He doesn't, he tries to walk around in the shoes of those, of other groups that are beyond his. Anyway, so if you could help me out, Rainier Graham, with this ONS's Suid like Boer. I'm not sure exactly what you're saying. Afri-Century is saying English, please, so others can understand. Yeah. Oh, maybe you're writing that to Rainier. That might be Afrikaner. That might be Afrikaner. I have spoke um, saying that Melina, and I've read this, Malema was an ANC, that's the African National Congress, that was the party of Nelson Mandela, was an ANC youth leader. Zuma was the South African president when he was singing the song in the clip. So this clip that Trump has shown and that I've linked down below is historical. It's not just all from 1 week or 1 year, it's over a period of time. And so he's talking about when when we have Malema singing in this clip, that he was doing that at a time when he was the youth leader of the African National Congress, which is the party that was led by Zuma, and prior to that, led by Nelson Mandela. Thank you for throwing that in. SPOK. Spock spoke. Amonarchy's writing. Maybe you got something else. About the PCR test being, talking about the fact that I had COVID in February 2022 and I've been clean. I haven't been sick since then at all. I don't really care. I never had a test. I've never once had a COVID test. I never had I called them a nasal colonoscopy, where that applicator would get shoved up your nose into your brain. Never had one. And I never took a rapid test. So the reason I suspect I had COVID in February 2022 is based strictly on symptomology. I had a low-grade headache, a dry, non-productive cough, general aches and pains. I ran a low-grade fever. I had chills, and then shortly thereafter, I got pink eye, conjunctivitis, and it went from one eye to the other and then back again over about a 2 week period. And so at that time, February, March 2022, they were saying that conjunctivitis or pink eye, that it was a common rebound after a COVID infection. So I said, okay, chances are it was COVID, but it wasn't based on a test and a monarchy. Because I had no interest in, what I call a nasal colonoscopy. SPOK is writing Malema, EFF. This is economic freedom force or economic freedom fighters. I had to check back. Um, Writing Malema, EFF, economic freedom fighters, Zuma, MK, and ANC are all of the same bloodline. Okay. You mean that they're linked by community? Because I know within the Black South African community, you have the Zulu, you have the Bantu, you have the Bushman, you have these different ethno-racial groups within the Black community. We tend, it's interesting how, in the European world, and you got to understand the African continent is much larger than Europe and a lot bigger than Western Europe. And so we would never confuse Italian people from Scandinavians or Scandinavians from Spaniards or Spaniards from Hungarians or Polish people or, whatever. We have all these disparaging groups within Europe, and we don't conflate them all as being just one people because they're all white. And you can't do that in Africa either. Africa, you have the Zulu, the Bantu, the Bushman, the countless. There's got to be hundreds of different ethno-racial groups within. They share the same, dark skin complexion, but there's more to ethnicity than simply melanin, how much melanin is in your skin. And anyway, so when you say, and I got to scroll up because now the chat is really filling up. Um, when Spock spoke, SPOK is saying Molina, EFF, Suma, MK, and the African National Congress are all the same bloodline. Do you mean racially, or do you mean that they're all of the same, that they all sprang out one out of the other? Like I would assume that out of the ANC sprang different parties. Anyway, if you could inform us. Um, and Danny's writing using Google Translate. What that was written earlier was that we are Boer farmers. Very good. And Afri Century is writing that Rainer means he's Southern Boer. Not sure what he means by this. And this is a distinction. What's the distinction? I've got to check into this. There's so much to learn. What's the difference between a Boer, B-O-E-R, and an Afrikaner? I don't know. Are they synonymous? I don't think they are, but maybe they are. Um, uh, and Monarchy's trying to make fun out of it. Suede like boar, boar suede. Apparently, hogs are moving into Ontario. Danny, Southern Farmers. Rainier Graham is writing ANC and EFF. Mandela, all of them are terrorists. So Rainier Graham seems to have some very definitive opinions, and it sounds to me, at least, like you're from South Africa. We, the minority in South Africa, are targets by these ANC thugs, but we will survive through God. That's one thing to understand about the Afrikaner community, and maybe the Boers as well. I've got to learn my vocabulary. I might do another video on this, who knows? But the Afrikaner community is incredibly religious. There was at one point, from what I understand, a major battle. The British had come in, they had taken over. The Afrikaners did not appreciate the British administration. It's kind of similar to North American history when you had groups who would push pioneers would push in to the North American landscape because they wanted to get away from civilization. They wanted to get away from, they wanted to pioneer the land. They wanted to break the land. They didn't want Big Brother looking over their shoulder at everything they did. And I think that same element existed within the Afrikaner population. They moved out and they came into contact with a large Zulu nation, tribe, whatever you want to call it. and apparently they were down in a little valley surrounded on the hills around it by thousands of Zulu warriors. And there were like 150 of these Afrikaner pioneers, for lack of a better word. I'm sure there's an Afrikaner word for pioneer, but they pushed into the, into the wilderness, and they found themselves surrounded. And the story is that they were done. Like there were 10, 15,000 Zulus, 156. It's like the movie Zulu that starred Michael Caine. And so they thought they were going to be wiped out. And then they made a covenant with God. And they basically said, God, if you will deliver us from our enemies, we will make this a Sabbath day to the Lord. Almost going right back into the Old Testament. It's going to be a Sabbath day to the Lord, a day of rest, a day of no work, a day of religious observance. And they, uh, according to at least the either the history or the folklore, and those two things can sometimes join together, not one single Afrikaner pioneer was killed. And to this day, they celebrate, and I think it's in December. The Afrikaner community celebrates this day as a Sabbath day to the Lord in a fashion similar to what the Israelites would have done in in the pre-Christian era in Judea. Anyway, let's catch up. Um, so thank you, Rainier. Kind of sent me off on that tangent by writing that that we will survive, and I assume by we he may be Afrikaner or she. We will survive through God. Spock is writing, or spoke, or whatever. After 31 years of ANC rule, who is Malema revolting against? He was in the ANC for decades. Yes, that's what I've read, is that this Malema was the leader of the youth delegation for the African National Congress. And again, I already knew, I didn't have to read that, the African National Congress, this ANC political party, was basically the creation of Nelson Mandela when he became the first post apartheid president of South Africa. Uh, and then Afri Century is writing that they are Xhosa, and I don't know what XHOSA means. And this could be another community. This is where, man, oh man, one of you guys, Afri Century or Spoke or Rainier, you need to put up a video and tap me, let me know when you're doing it, because I would love to listen in. I love learning history, disparaging history. When it comes right down to it, the history of South Africa has a lot of commonalities with the history in my native where I live, North America. There's a lot of commonalities. And you learn something about the human condition when you learn about the history of South Africa or the history of North America or the history of Australia or New Zealand. Anyway, um, and Rainier is saying that there are lots of different Black communities. Yes, this idea that we have this idea that there's this, it's got to be racism uh, to a degree, although that might be the wrong term. But there's a tendency to take incredibly complex systems and to just break them down into something very stupidly easy. And as I was saying, we don't look at the European continent and we don't say, well, that the Scandinavians, well, they're white and so are the Greeks. So Greeks, Scandinavians, Italians, Spanish, British, they're all the same. French, doesn't matter. They're all just white people. But there's a tendency I find among uh, call it probably among Europeans and North Americans and others to look at Africa and to go, okay, well, those are Black people. And there are hundreds, literally of hundreds of ethnic tribes that have, their own genetics, their unique ethnic groups, just as we have unique ethnic groups within Europe. Uh, uh, let's see what SPOK is writing. Whipping boys that what whipping boys. That's what South African whites are. Okay. Well, things apparently economically in South Africa are not going well. The economy is not doing particularly well. And when things are not going well, there's a tendency to you need a scapegoat. Whose fault is it? Well, it's the white farmers. And if you and this guy Malema being a communist, I know a bit about Joseph Stalin and what he did to Russia, to post-Tsarist Russia, post-Leninist Russia. And there was a group in the old Soviet Union within Russia. They were called the kulaks. And the kulaks were, I will use the term, peasant farmers. They worked the land. And because they were producing food, they were better off. Everyone was peasants. Everyone in pre-industrialized Russia was very poor. But the kulaks, because they owned land and cultivated it well and were productive at what they did, they had a higher standard of living than the vast majority. But the kulaks also were the ones feeding everyone. They were producing the food. And then Stalin and his Bolshevik crowd came in, and Russia was a backwater. The rest of the world has industrialized, and Russia has not. Poverty is rampant, but people are not starving to death. And Stalin comes along and he goes, well, you want to know why you're so poor? You want to know why things are so bad? It's because of those kulaks. Those kulaks. They're doing better than you. They are oppressing you. You are being oppressed by them. And so then what happened is the government under Stalin seized all their land and collectivized the farms, collectivization. And then what happened is food production cratered because the people who were most adept at cultivating and most productive at producing food were in large cases murdered, and they lost their land. And so then what happened is you had mass starvation in Russia under Stalin. And it sounds like, and because of this Malema and his association with communism, Marxism, could we see the same type of disaster unfold in South Africa? Population 60 plus million people. Are we going to see mass starvation? I mean, South Africa, some of the soil, especially apparently in the southeast, it's amazing. Apparently, that's what the Dutch are famous for. That's why they went there. That's why they chose the land that they did. Is they said, "Wow, this is good farming land." And the people, when they settled the land, the people living on the land at the time, back in the 1600s, the people were Bushmen who are a different ethnic group from the Zulus, from the Bantu. They're not the people who are living there now. The original inhabitants were these Bushmen who led nomadic hunter gatherer type existences. And it was actually the Bushmen also came, not only did they come into conflict with the European settlers, but they also came into contact with Northern African peoples who came down who were more technologically advanced. The Bushmen, their weaponry was very rudimentary, meant to kill animals. And then the Zulus came down with spears, and they didn't have anything to compete with the spears. So, um, SPOK is writing, when they are done with the whites, they're coming for Indians, mixed races, and I don't even know what the KOISAN is, but maybe that's blacks or mulatto individuals. I don't know. I don't know the vocabulary well enough. Uh, let's see what's being written. AfriCentry is writing that Afrikaner has some kind of infighting between themselves. Some want to call themselves uh, Afrikaner. Some want to be called Boers. Some just want to be known as South African. And this is the thing. We tend to want to redact everything into a brain dead simple black, white, yes, no, right, wrong, easy. You know, so there are blacks and there are whites, but within the white community, there is conflict. Within the black community, there is conflict and division. It's not simple. Uh, and SPOK is writing that all minorities in South Africa are under attack. The USA refugee program is open to all minorities. that'll be an important distinction, and I hope that comes through play, is that if it's anyone within South Africa, regardless of their skin tone, should be welcome. If they're, is it just going to be, is it only going to be white South Africans who are welcomed in the United States? Uh, anyway, what's Danny writing? He's writing that the term Afrikaner is a more encompassing term for the white South African population who speak Afrikaans, which not all South Africans speak Afrikaner. There's a large percentage of that 2.7 million Afrikaner population who speak Afrikaner as their main language. I think it's over half of the Afrikaner community speaks this derivative of the Dutch language as their main language. But I would imagine they're also fluent in English as well. And then Danny's writing that Boer is a term referring to the Dutch speaking settlers who were farmers in South Africa. So it's sounding to me like Boer is more of a historical term, and that Afrikaner is more of a modern term. And we had the two Boer Wars, in which Canada, interestingly, we Canada sent troops to South Africa during those Boer Wars. But we, at that time, our forces were under the total command of the British. Uh, Rainier Graham is writing, Google Blood River, my friend. Just one more that blew one's mind. 300 Boers against 20,000 Zulus, and the Boers won through God. I think that is the one I was referencing. Um, the way I've heard it referenced is that how many Zulus were there? One, as many as 20,000, some say 10, who knows? And that it was in and around 150, but you're saying 300 Boer, Afrikaner descendants, and where they made a covenant with God, saying that, grant us victory, you know, be our strong arm in this fight against this people who are going to annihilate us, and we will make this day a Sabbath day unto the Lord. And I think it was sometime in December, a specific day in December, and it doesn't matter. A Sabbath day to the Lord in the Old Testament could be any day of the week. It does not have to be Friday when the sun goes down, Saturday. It doesn't have to be. Every seventh day is to be a Sabbath day, but you can have Sabbath days that are not the Saturday. Anyway, uh, and Rainier is asking, where am I? Kind of off my shoulder there, you get a representation. Toronto area. I live in the country. I live in an area that's populated by a lot of Dutch people. The Vans and we got the De Vries and the Vanders, and a lot of Dutch people in this area because it's a farming area. And I'm about 150 kilometers from Toronto, east in Ontario, Canada. Um, SPOK is writing, after century, not much necklacing went down amongst whites. Winnie Mandela burnt 400 black people to death. Go spin your guys. Try not to fight. There is enough conflict in this world. I don't like to bring it to my channel. Uh, uh, and I don't know if you're talking to me, Rainier. Uh, Winnie Mandela was, of course, the wife of Nelson Mandela, although they had a bit of their relationship, a lot of question marks about it. I'm not going to get into that. What's SPOK writing? Afri-Center feedback on Shell House massacre that Mandela ordered shoot to kill a few months before he became president. There's a lot of history there. And from a white European descended North American perspective, there's a tendency to look upon things from a very simplistic view. And, this dynamic of an oppressive white minority subjugating a black majority is very reductionist. It's just boiling it down to the simplest form, but it has a lot of currency in the marketplace of ideas in North America, certainly. And you know, South Africa came onto my radar probably back in the early 90s as apartheid was coming to an end. I remember Bruce Springsteen and one of his musicians doing that famous song, "I Ain't Gonna Play Sun City." And then you had artists like Eddie Grant who had the song "Give Me Hope, Joanna." Joanna being a representation of Johannesburg, South Africa. Give me hope, Joanna. Yeah, hope until the morning come. And it's a sad situation. Rainier Graham is writing that Malema, Ramphosa, they all Ramphosa, yeah, Ramphosa, they're all the same. Conflict breeds upon itself, and the politicians love it. Who Cuddly is writing, the best arable land is black owned and not used. The Boers are using arid land to feed the country. The Dutch are incredibly skilled at farming. And ideally, you would think it would be nice if we could live in a world where, these ethnic, these racial, there's so many, we seek so many ways to divide humanity by skin color, by religion, by, all manner, family clans. So it's the default position of the human race is tribalism. We all want to get into our own little tribe and then go to war with opposing tribes. Um, anyway, I have been going on for over an hour now, and I probably didn't accomplish much other than to give people a chance to vent on things and to, probably did shed some light into the complexity of the situation. And ultimately, I think the best we can do is simply to pray for a peaceful solution, pray that the Afrikaner population within South Africa, that they can find a way to live peacefully amongst everyone, peace and prosperity for all, but that's probably a vain hope. Things are probably going to get worse. We will see what happens. I thank everyone who showed up on the live stream. Thank you for the incredibly active chat, seeing names that I haven't seen here before. Uh, and Afrocentry, don't worry about it. I know that these things get contentious. People think that they have a monopoly on the truth, that their perspective is the only perspective. Afrocentry is writing that, he and SPOK, that he was getting attacked for no reason, whatever. Uh, you know, we need to calm things down. And I mentioned this earlier in the stream. This world needs Christ. Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus, and I'm going to invoke the words that he spoke again during the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus said, "You have heard it said, take an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth and a life for a life. But I say unto you, take not an eye for an eye, nor a tooth for a tooth, but to everyone who hits you on the left cheek, offer them up the right one also. If someone takes from you your sandals, do not deny them your cloak. Give of everyone who asks of you. If someone asks you to go a mile, go two." And this is it goes against basic human nature. Our human nature is to attack back. It's not to be loving and accepting and kind and warm and welcoming. These are revolutionary ideas, and Jesus was the greatest revolutionary who ever walked the face of the earth. And so, I pray that in South Africa, that all populations, the Afrikaner population, just because Afrikaners may profess the Christian faith, it's one thing to profess it, but you also have to live it. You have to walk it. It's not just about professions. It's not just about covenants. It's also about living, living the Christian way. And when you read Acts of the Apostles, the followers of Christ were called followers of the way. They weren't actually called Christians until decades later. Initially, the followers of Christ were called followers of the way because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the way. And if there's any answer to all this, both the Afrikaner population and the disparaging Black populations within South Africa recognize that we are all image bearers. We all bear the image of the one that created us. So I'm going to leave it there. And God bless. Thank you for watching. If you made it to this far and you're not subscribed to my channel, I welcome you to do so. You're also welcome to fill the comment field. I see I've already gotten a number of likes. I appreciate those as well. They help grow my channel. I do think I have something to inject into the public marketplace of ideas. I think I offer something of a unique perspective. 58 years of age, spent time growing up in the United States of America, New York, New Jersey, Oregon. But as a Canadian born, spent time in the Canadian Armed Forces, only left the military in June of 2021 because I refused to get the COVID jab. I was smart enough to realize that I don't want to get injected with a pharmaceutical product that was rushed through development in just a few short months when it should have taken 10 years or thereabouts anyway. Um, I did study political science at university along with the humanities. I've lived a decent amount of time, born in 1966, and I think I have something to contribute to the public marketplace of ideas. Don't profess to know everything or to get everything right, but the biggest thing I think I'm capable of doing is to spur thoughtful, meaningful, and reflective conversation, and to get, you know, recognize that there are powers in this world that are trying to direct us in ways that are not productive, in ways that are actually against our own best interests. The media has too much power in today's world, too much power to influence. They tell us what to think, what to believe, how to feel. So I like what Rainier is saying. You don't get the jab if you believe in God. Uh, And AfriCentury is thanking me for the chat. Rainier, no, I am not an American. I am Canadian, born in Canada. When I was 6 months old, we moved to New York City. My dad worked in the financial district or the financial industry. And I did spend 10 years as a Canadian growing up in New York City, New Jersey, and Portland, Oregon, out in the West Coast. I have to recognize when I talk to a more global audience that people don't always know the North American landscape. So, uh, anyway, God bless and thank you everyone who showed up. And I'm going to be checking back in the comment field. Hopefully, I'll get some commentary on here. And criticism is welcome, especially constructive criticism. So, God bless, and we will see you all again at some point. Good night.